and has embraced our students in our program and has really been a champion for this. We have another partner, Oakville Community Living, who has been amazing. They have actually funded our two skills trainers who are on site supporting our students throughout the course of their internships, and they have been amazing. And then we have a third partner who really was a driving force in terms of getting this going, and that is Marilyn Ellis from Autism Job Club. The process is that we promoted the program, we got the information into the hands of parents in our CPP, and we invited all students in their graduating year to apply. Any of the students that did submit an application were then invited to our skills assessment day at the hospital, where students actually participated in a variety of skills assessments that were set up by the staff at OTMH. Based on the outcome of those skills assessment, a committee of community partners then selected our successful candidates. While on site, the students are supported by a Student Services IPL, a CCA, classroom teacher, in this case, Lisa Prentice, who has been absolutely fantastic, and two community living skills trainers. So here are some of our students at work last year. One thing you will notice is that these are real jobs that exist in the hospital. These are not jobs that were created for our students. It speaks to the authenticity. Our students are expected to go to the hospital. They are treated like any other employee, and they are expected to perform as any other employee would. So I'm going to show you a little video now. I hope this plays. I did try it, Mark, today, so I'm hoping that this plays here. And this will give you a little indication of what it looks like in action. Working, Rob.
The ultimate goal of Project Search is to support our students through finding competitive employment. We do that through teaching both the soft skills and the employability skills, such as time management, communication skills, self-advocacy, budgeting, teamwork, and they're able to actually practice that in the workplace here at the hospital.
So Project Search for my son has been life-changing at this point for him. He feels like he belongs and he's learning employment skills. So for us, that means that he'll find meaningful employment, and it makes it like we're just more excited about the future for him.
Project Search has given him the ability to become part of a team, doing exactly the same job, doing it very well. And he views himself as someone who's going to be able to be independent, going to work, and really be like everybody else and be part of a team. So he really knows this is his destiny because he can do that now. And it's just a great gift for him.
What I like about Project Search is instead of going for our last year of high school, we come here and have this opportunity to learn a work experience for when we're out in the real life.
We are looking at partnerships, and in our strategic plan, collaboration is a huge component of that. We looked and reached out to the Halton District School Board, Community Living, Autism Life Path to put this program in place and partnering with them.
We are trying to help the students to live independently and to find them meaningful job, to help them with their daily life, to provide to the community.
I think this project is great for Halton. I mean, I don't know where else he would have got this experience.
So you can see the impact that this program has had not only on the lives of the students, but the family members as well. And and really the community at large. Last year, our students were able to select one of 14 different internships in the hospital, but because of the work that our students have done, different departments across the hospital have approached Jim and his staff to say, how can we get involved in this program? And so we've actually increased our internships at the hospital by 3 this year. So there'll be 17 different internships students can choose from. So it's quite exciting. I'm going to now just run you through what our graduates are doing currently today. Again, the purpose of the program is to teach competitive work skills. The measure of success is there's a multitude of measures, but one of them is outcome. We want students to be working upon graduation. So we're very pleased to report that you see Marlo here. Marlo attended White Oak Secondary School CPP.
Sorry, Rob, you're still sharing the video screen.
Oh,
If you close that one or stop.
sorry.
Yep.
There we go. I'm sorry about that.
Thanks.
So here we have Marlo, and Marlo is attended White Oak Secondary School CPP. He completed internships in the work-fit cardio care and emergency department. He's been currently employed since May at Oakville Trafalgar as a pandemic relief assistant. And just a little side note, just recently, Marlo was working a shift, and through his training, he was able to identify one of the patients who was in crisis. He felt that the patient may be having a seizure. He called a code blue. They were indeed having a seizure. The paramedics came and were able to assist the person in crisis, and he was commended for that. It just speaks to the fact that when we push our kids and hold them to a high standard, they can deliver. So he was commended for that. We have Katie here. I saw Katie the other day on a visit. She was sitting right at that desk. There she's sitting there now, checking people in for their COVID tests. She actually joined a little late last year. We had a couple of spots open up. She joined us for one internship, but because of COVID, she only completed one. So we're having her back this year, but she has been employed at OTMH since May, as well as a pandemic relief assistant. We've got Ryan, who's in a very similar situation to Katie. He joined us halfway through the year last year, was very successful, completed an internship in IT communications, and he's also been employed as a pandemic relief assistant since May. Here we have Hunter. Hunter attended Georgetown District High School CPP. He worked in food services and medical device reprocessing. And that is actually where you go and select the equipment that is needed for particular surgeries. So it is a very important job. He was outstanding. He has been employed since May as a pandemic relief assistant, and he recently interviewed for a full-time permanent position in food services, which is absolutely amazing. Then we have Anaya, who attended Robert Bateman CPP. She did an internship in marketing, renal dialysis. She's also been employed since May in the pandemic relief assistant. We have Lucas here. Lucas also attended Robert Bateman. He worked in food facilities and food services. He was working as a pandemic relief assistant until September the 18th, and he actually applied for a position that came up. It's a full-time, it's a part-time permanent position in food services at Georgetown Hospital, and was successful in the interview. So that's where he's at working right now. Here we have Andrew, who was amazing. He had a very successful year. He is currently at home due to COVID, family decision, but I'm sure he will have a place at the hospital when everything settles down. And then we have Kyle Graham, who is also very successful. You can see him working in the photos there. He completed internships in the work-fit cardio care and the business development and marketing. He's currently at home as well, currently because of the pandemic, but they were very excited to have him back upon graduation. So that brings us to 2020-21. I'm very happy to let you know that despite some of the challenges with our process due to COVID, we were able to get through it virtually. We have a very robust program this year. I was there the other day. We have a beautiful brand new classroom which allows for social distancing. So again, thank you to OTMH for providing us the beautiful space. We have 11 Project Search interns this year. They are excited. They're really eager to get out there. We've had our first intern actually start a placement on Monday, and the rest of the young adults will be out in the next week or the week after. So that's the end of the presentation. I do want to say a special thanks to the senior admin for supporting this, Mark and Stuart and David and Sean. It was kind of a weird year when we started talking about this, but their support made it happen, and you can see the results. So thank you.
So I think now we'll take any questions. If you want to put your hand up through the chat column, and I think Joanna will facilitate those questions. No questions at this moment.
Please, Margot has a question, I think, from what I can see there.
It's not really a question. I was trying to put my hand up, but I couldn't find the chat room. Oh, there it is. So I just wanted to say thank you. I just think it's so nice to see how these students are feeling so empowered to go out and get them, right? So go out and do things. So it's just really nice. It's really appreciated, Rob, that you have put such an effort into this. I'm so happy to meet you face to face. I've spoken to you on the phone before, but it's nice to put a face to the name I hear so often. So again, thank you for all your hard work.
I see Heather has her hand up.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I happen to know two of those students that were just flashed up there. One of them I've known since he was in grade 1. And it's just making me so proud to see what's happening here, and that it's just amazing. And I also know that both of those particular students' parents work in our system, and they're hardworking individuals that give back to other kids all day, every day. And this is just an amazing program. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I'll take this opportunity also to express my gratitude for the partnership that HDSB has formed with OTMH. I think it's wonderful that our students can actually be engaged and trained and participate in a real job, and how amazing to see that experience transpire into full-time or part-time or even occasional employment. It just makes me so happy. And thank you for all the work you and your team are doing, and our extreme gratitude to OTMH. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Joanna, I'd like to add that we've struggled trying to find opportunities for our kids after graduation. Most of our students stay to 21 years of age in CPP. And then after that, there's, depending on the student and the community, for some, there's not a lot out there. So it can be a real challenging endeavor for families, what to do, how to support their students afterwards. And we have done some co-op opportunities through CPP before, but they haven't been structured like Project Search. Project Search has really been focused on the students gaining that ability to turn what they're doing into employment afterwards. It's not just, get an experience and off we go. The focus is hopefully that they are employable at the end of it. And so we were optimistic that maybe a few of them would be employed, but as you can see from what Rob shared, like, it's really, really turned out incredibly well. And I think those testimonials you heard from those parents, those would be probably the same for all of those families, that this is truly life-changing. So I have to take my hat off to Rob. He doesn't have much hair, but he has been instrumental from the very beginning. You know, this project was a long time in the making. He went through many meetings and challenges of trying to figure out how to make this work, you know, within our educational system and the parameters within the province. And you know, through that partnership and Rob's skills at making that work with all the people involved, you know, overcame all those hurdles and was able to find a way to make this happen. It's truly a fantastic project, one that we'd like to try to replicate, expand into more workplaces in Halton. You know, we know there's limitations to it being at OTMH. So that's something we're looking at. We're trying to keep this going at that location and then look at ways to expand that other places. So a huge thank you to Rob for all the work that he's done.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And if I just add, so through our open houses, we've often had staff members from other school boards come and listen and then reach out after the fact. And so since we started, I believe Hamilton has started a program this year, and so has Toronto. So it's exciting for our community at large, not just here in Halton. So really exciting things. And again, I thank you for the opportunity to come and present that.
Yeah, thank you. And Mark, you partially answered my question in that I'm glad to hear that Project Search is looking to expand to other businesses or companies. And you know, good luck with that. I'm hoping that there will be people who will be quite interested, and maybe some of those connections can be made with OTMH so that you know, the HR and those companies can kind of figure out how this can work. Because there's a lot of different businesses and industry types out there. Oakville is very prolific in a number of things, as is Halton in general. So it'd be good to see those kinds of projects initiated elsewhere. Good luck to you.
Joanna, do you see the question? Sophia has asked a question.
Yes. So Sophia, would you like to ask it in person?
Sure. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So yeah, first of all, I want to sort of echo what everybody said. Incredible opportunity. And I know firsthand there's so many kids after graduation that really just don't know what to do and families are struggling. So this is amazing. I hope it's here to stay. But if I wanted to share information with our families about possible registration for next year, is there a place they could go on our website, or where can I direct them?
Yeah, so I can share the web. We do have a Project Search website. And then this year we're doing virtual open houses with all of the CPP community to make sure everybody gets the information around registration and the application process. But I'll make sure that everyone here has access to the website if you want some more information or to share it.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Rob, can you send a link to the website to Lorna? And then
yes.
Lorna has our mailing list for SEAC.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Ciao.
I'm moving to item 2.2. This is our second presentation tonight, and it's about summer learning and mental health. And we have with us the Manager of Student Services and the Principal of Special Education, Rebecca and Mark. So welcome, and over to you.
Maybe I'll start. Thanks, Lou. So
okay.
What you're going to hear about now is opportunities that were provided through the provincial government, through the Ministry of Ed's funding, that was specifically provided this year because of the pandemic, knowing that our schools were closed during the spring. So the government provided both funding for what was called summer learning, specifically focused on students with special needs, and mental health supports for all students in Halton during the summer. So Becky Mantonin is our one of our managers of professional services who focuses on social work. There she is. And so she led our mental health supports. And then Sean Marks, as you all know, is our principal of special education, and he led the sermon learning opportunities. So you have two presentations now. In between each, Becky, you're going first, is that right? Yeah, so in between, after Becky's done, we're going to try, we've decided to try to go back to what we've done before, where we've done our breakout groups. So well, Lauren is going to take us through that at the end of the presentations. But if you recall, when we've done these before, we haven't gotten into a lot of questions right after the presentation because there's the chance for people to talk about that more when we go into the breakout groups. So when we do the presentation, after that, if you could just ask questions of clarification, just so you can really make sure you understand what it is that has been shared with you. Then we'll go on to the second presentation, do the same thing after that, and then get into breakout groups where we can have more discussion about the value of what you learned and how to apply it in other situations, etc. So that's the format we'll follow. And this is going to be a trial. We haven't done this before, as you know, virtually. So we've tried to work through the logistics, and we're optimistic it's going to work. So a reminder, Becky's going to put up her slideshow, and if you were like me and you switched out of spotlight mode so you could see everybody, you might want to go back into spotlight mode. So if you again go down to those three dots and change layout into spotlight, then you'll be able to see her presentation fully. All yours, Becky.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for having me here tonight to talk about what we did over the summer. I'm going to share my screen, and you should be able to see my presentation. Okay, so we started off this summer, as Mark said, we had some additional funding, and we really wanted to make sure that our students were feeling supported. We knew how difficult this pandemic was on so many families and so many of our students. We certainly saw students that were receiving services begin to kind of fall away from our services and our supports, and we wanted to wrap them back up and to make sure that they had those transition and summer supports that they may find beneficial. So we asked for referrals from the school board, from principals and teachers to refer students to us that would be potentially in need of summer supports. And we particularly asked, I didn't have a slide to do specifically on this, but we also asked specifically for schools to consider students with developmental needs. We certainly knew that these children were disproportionately affected by the pandemic and their families, with a loss of routine and disruptions and all those sorts of things. We ended up receiving 94 referrals for the summer. We had 14 social workers working. They weren't working full time. We certainly wanted to make sure that some people still got away for some summertime. So they worked a variety of part-time schedules to deliver that service, and we delivered it over 8 weeks of the summer. So out of those 94 referrals, we ended up supporting 91 students and their family members. In the end, some students we reached out and they declined service right away. They might have had vacation or other things going on or been connected with community supports. And some chose to decline service a little later on. But overall, we serviced 76% of those families over the summer. We had basically a half and half ratio between elementary and secondary. And I know a lot of people would want to know, what were your top concerns? What were the things that students were talking about with the social workers? Top concerns are very commonly anxiety and depression, and you see that borne out over the summer as well. Transition to school was another big worry. Some challenges with behaviors, family issues and conflict. We were all in a lockdown scenario, lots of families in close quarters for long periods of time. Grief was another subject. Kids and the loss of that friend group, the loss of being able to go out and hang out with their friends, be outside of the home and do other things they would normally engage in, loss of activities. Substance use, We did see an uptick, as did several other agencies supporting youth around substances, but there was more substance use during the pandemic. Interpersonal conflict, OCD behaviors, and suicidal ideation. So in terms of the type of service provided, a lot of it was mental health check-in and brief support. Some of it was parent support and coaching. You'll see that, the percentages here. School transition support, clinical therapy, lots of referrals to community that kids and parents were asking for. And of course, there was some crisis response as well. The number of sessions provided, our total number of sessions that we held was 422. We had 216 with students, 115 with family members. We had lots of sessions with community supports. MAN stands for Mental Health and Addiction Nurse. They are our community mental health and addiction nurses that are through our LIN. Lots of conversations with staff and virtual sessions with agency partners organizing and case coordinating care. The percent of students served by number of sessions, I thought this might be interesting, and we've certainly been keeping our eye on this. This is how many times students engage with us. Sometimes students are engaging with us maybe for 1 or 2 sessions, whereas other times our support is lengthier. So this is kind of our measure about how often these students engaged with us. So as you can see, there was a considerable number of students that engaged for 4 to 10 sessions over the summer, about half. While the other half were kind of 1 to 3 sessions. Some of our feedback, we did ask some of our folks for feedback on our summer services. It was the very first time services of this type had ever been offered. And it certainly was unusual when our community partners found out that we were going to be supporting students over the summer. And a lot of parents and students welcomed this opportunity. So we did ask them for support. We didn't hear back from as many students and parents as we had hoped to, but we also did get the survey out fairly late in the summer, and some parents and families may have been off on vacation. But of those that did respond, we did have 25 survey respondents. As you can see, 95% were very comfortable receiving our support. That's another thing we were always monitoring, is how was our transition into virtual services going. As many of you know, a lot of services transitioned into virtual services almost overnight during COVID. That can be really tough when you're thinking about counseling services that are done in a one-to-one, face-to-face basis. Sometimes that proved to be a challenging transition, and some kids really took to it quite easily. In fact, I would say it removed barriers from a number of kids who could engage with their social worker over the phone. They were able to find confidential spaces using their cell phones, tucked away in their room. They didn't have to come down to the social worker's office at school. They were able to access their social worker wherever it is they were. So I would say that that was, in many ways, removing barriers for kids. In some ways, though, it was strange at first for kids to get used to seeing us online and get that feeling of comfortability while seeing a social worker online. So you can see some of the comments here. They like talking to their social worker. They can move around while they're talking, all those sorts of things. 96% reported that our support during virtual sessions was helpful or very helpful. 68% reported they were very satisfied with the virtual support they received. We had lots of positive comments from both parents and kids about how helpful this was over the summer and what a lifeline it was, whether they were looking at transition or anxiety, going back to school, struggling with supports over the summer, or just general anxiety over what was happening in their lives. We found that it was a very helpful service for those that we were able to reach. And that is the end of my presentation.
Thanks, Becky. So, again, we're looking for any questions.
Okay, so if anybody has any questions, please raise your hand in the chat box. Sorry, Margot, go ahead.
Hi, thanks Rebecca for your great presentation. The feedback that you got, was it anonymous feedback?
So all of our feedback was handled. We have a research assistant that is helping us in creating surveys, and all the information was handled confidentially by her. And all information was de-identified before I received any of it. So all of that was outlined to parents and students when we sent out the survey to them.
So my question is so although 68% were very satisfied, that still leaves 32% that were either just satisfied or dissatisfied. I don't know where they fell, but is there any follow-up for those parents who didn't feel that the support that you gave, which I'm sure was fantastic, didn't suit their needs? So what sort of were our next steps as far as trying to bridge that gap for those students or those families who didn't feel the support was helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. So they were all given my contact information as the manager, so they could have absolutely called to give feedback if they were comfortable doing that. We also encouraged them to talk to their social workers at the closing. Social workers were given a bit of a script to chat with parents and students about what they found helpful, what might be more helpful next time in terms of offering this very first time summer support.
So what were our identified next steps? So in trying to make that bit more, that big, how can we make it better? What were our take backs from that?
Number one was people wanted it next year. Number two was some families indicated that it was difficult over the summer in terms of touching base with social workers who were working part-time. So with their family schedules and our part-time schedules. So that was another thing for us to take back and to think about in terms of if this was ever an opportunity to do again. It was more challenging, I think, with social workers working part-time and reaching them and communicating with them. There was also families who talked about the supports that they received and the transition to school, and just overall, it was a bit challenging with receiving information in a timely way, what school was going to look like. That was a big challenge, and I'm not sure how we might have rectified that when all of us were struggling at the beginning with what this is going to look like, and things were changing by the minute sometimes.
Excellent, thank you. I know I can only imagine how difficult this was, but I appreciate that you have been sort of looking at, hopefully they will be in a different place next year and we'll be that bit more prepared. So how we can move forward to even further better the performance that we give back. So thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Allison, your question next, please.
Yes, just to clarify, when we talk about summer, so this was the period from the end of June to beginning of September, or did we also offer service from March to June? So what was the period?
Sorry, Allison. This was specifically the summer. So yes, when we went into lockdown, the social workers as a group continued to work as teachers and everyone else did. And we went virtual very quickly. We started the virtual service in April. And then in the summer, we were given, this is different funding, and we were able to provide services from, I believe it was July 8th till August 28th was our 8-week window of delivering summer social work services.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Deidre, your question, please.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, you said that the cases were referred to you. I'm just wondering, were there any relationships that were previous involved with your group, or were they all new relationships that were created? Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you, Deidre, for that question. We had a significant number, so we asked social workers to go through their lists of active clients to think about and consider which clients might be requiring summer social work support and to offer it to them. And then we also asked principals and school staff, are there children that you can think about who would benefit from summer social work referrals?
And sorry, Becky, I think, wasn't there also the opportunity for students to self-refer during the summer as well?
Students always had the opportunity to self-refer from March until June. Students were able to self-refer for a very small window at the end of June to summer social work programs. I'm not sure that our messaging reached as many students as we would have wanted it to, but for sure there continues to be that opportunity now to self-refer to social work services.
And is that message to all students, or is that to previous relationships?
So for the purposes of summer social work, the message went out to mostly to students who were already existing on the social work caseloads. For current social work services, students can self-refer by themselves at any time, and the information is on every high school Google website.
Thank you.
Or will be very shortly.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for Rebecca? Okay, seeing none. So thank you. Yeah, Mark?
If I could say how, first, how incredible it's been to see the results here. I think you could see from the number of students that took advantage of this service and the feedback that we received, that this was really, really had some good uptake and really well received. So I think that's a real hands off to our staff, because they provided such great service to our students. Next, I have to praise Becky, because as she did yeoman's to work like all of our staff, moving from our in-person model to a virtual model in such short order. She and her team developed an entire virtual model of delivering social work service, which isn't as simple as just saying, okay, we'll just do this virtually. I think it was incredible the amount of work that went into making sure that all the privacy issues were addressed, the technical issues, the clinical issues. It was enormous work, which Becky did an incredible job with. And then when the province announced the funding for both this mental health work in the summer and what you're going to hear from Sean, that was in the second week of June. And so the amount of time, basically we had almost no turnaround time to have this up and running. And once again, Becky pulled it off. And we had great service provided to our students and families. I'm not sure if Becky took a vacation day through the summer, but our students and families certainly benefited from it. So thank you. I know she didn't do it all herself. She has a great team behind her. So thank you, Becky, to you and your team. So Becky's sticking around because Sean's going to do his presentation now, and then we'll go into the breakout groups to discuss what we heard in both sessions. So once again, if you're not in spotlight mode, you might want to go there for Sean's presentation.
Thanks, Mark. Before I get started on the presentation, because it'll be your third now in a row, and I'm already regretting being the third one to present. The two before this have gone really well. I was reminded when I was watching the project search, something I wanted to share with the committee here. Mark and I had a chance to tour through the hospital, and there was a point I was down in the basement where they were preparing equipment for the surgeries that were about to happen and gathering the materials. And I was talking to a staff member, and it was just off to the side. And they just came over. They weren't really involved in the tour, and they whispered to me. And Project Search is something we're very proud of, and there's a lot of great things that are happening for the students. But this person, no ties to the board or anything, came over and said, I just want you to know, when this first started, I had no desire to be part of it. I didn't want anybody, and I'm using it like this, like that, near me when I worked. I've completely changed my mind, We can't wait to get more. And I've talked to a number of people who have shared the same experience and change in attitude. And to me, that, as much as it's done for the students, when we change the mindsets of people, it's a remarkable piece. So yeah, so how do you follow Project Search? I'll give it a go. And how do you follow Becky? So I'm going to switch over to my slideshow. And hopefully you can see it now. So we had, like Becky's program, we had ministry funding to present summer learning to students. I'd say there was more detail than that provided, but there really wasn't. But I'll give you a basic timeline, and Mark alluded to this already. So as you can see on the timeline spans really June 4th to July 6th was our turnaround time to get things started. So on June 4th, that's when we received the ministry direction that said we had to provide the mental health plus the summer learning opportunities. So that gives you a window of about 3 weeks, and these are the big things that we needed to have happen. The first step the following week was to communicate with schools to begin preparing for the student communication. I mean, you can appreciate that at this time, nobody was in a building. We were just finalizing SRTs and IPRCs, trying in schools to wrap up for the summer session. And here we come in saying, we need you to make sure that you're prepared for what's about to come down for requests, because we're going to need to reach out to families for this new project or this new offering that we're going to have. We have no idea what it's going to look like, but it's going to be something, so just be prepared for something. So that started on the week of June 11th. So behind the scenes with some incredible staff on the team, we started to prepare for what that was going to look like. The first thing was to hire the staff. This wasn't mandatory. It's the summertime. Some staff had plans, albeit COVID kept a lot of people closer to home. And so we probably got a high uptake on who was interested in it. But we began to reach out to staff. We figured we needed to get a number of people. I'll back up one step. The only thing I wanted to make sure of, that we wanted to make sure of in the department, was that we offered as much as we possibly could for as many students as possible, given the constraints of the funding, the staffing, and the time. But we really wanted to make it as diverse as possible. So we reached out to staff and we said, send us your proposals. If you're interested in this, we'll go through the hiring process. And we want to know what programs we're going to be able to offer for students. So while that's happening, we're also simultaneously building a registration process. And I got to tell you, this was, you'll see the numbers in a little bit. Well, there's one on the next little bullet there, but there's no way I could have done this. This was a monstrous undertaking, and Lisa Rhodes, who is our SIA officer, took this on with our co-op students who do all the SIA equipment and their familiarity with spreadsheets and tracking and all that sort of stuff. They were instrumental in making sure this happened, because it was, if nothing else, it was our biggest learning curve on how to turn around what the programs are going to be and how to get students registered into the appropriate programs. And that was our biggest challenge. So that happened over the course of 1 week. Then we had to send out the registrations to families, well, to schools, to share with families. And then on June 28th, that was the last day for parents to register. So in the span of 2 weeks, we went from nothing to having over 1,200 requests. So that's an incredible uptake. And if you were part of it, you saw what the registration process was. It wasn't easy. It wasn't clear. It took a long time. If you had seen our first iteration of it, compared to the one you actually saw, you would have seen the work that went into it. But by only seeing the final result, you're going to say, well, you could have done it this way. We could have done it better this way. And absolutely, had we had the time, we certainly would have. But we're hoping next time, if there's a situation where we need to do this again, we have a better understanding of what that's going to look like. And then July 6th, so once the registrations came in on June 28th, our turnaround to get the right students into the right programs, we had, what is that, a week and a half. to get everything up and running. So that's coordinating with the teachers, figuring out the technology, making sure the programs are there. So that's the framework of everything that's going on here. Give you a little bit of the background. This is what this is right out of what the ministry came. Now, I will say that what you're reading now came after the June 4th information. So this came about a week and a half later after we'd already started the process. And fortunately, we were on track with what the ministry was expecting. Again, the main goal here is to support the students over the summer. The students who arguably were the most hit by schools closing down because of COVID. And then this was the direct objective right from the ministry. So in order to reach this objective, we had to establish the programs, and I just go into it a bit more detail here. We decided that we were going to run 3 blocks. So you saw July 6th was the starting point. Every block was going to run for 2 weeks, and there was going to be a morning session and an afternoon session. We knew we wanted, and it was consistent with what the ministry wanted, we wanted synchronous time. So we're all familiar with synchronous learning now, since the start of the new school year. But back in the spring, when we first were in lockdown and shutdown, it was kind of hit and miss what was happening with synchronous. But we knew for the summer learning, we wanted to offer some face-to-face time with our students. So it was going to be a morning and an afternoon session. We also decided on that so that we could get more students into the program. The goal was really to turn nobody away. Everybody, we did our very best to make sure that everybody got one session at least. I won't say that we succeeded, but I would say it was less than 50 students that we weren't able to provide something for, and we tried everything. And part of it was family times and what they were available for as well. We did it for both panels, secondary and elementary, as you'll see. So in the end, we ended up with 115 sessions provided over 7 weeks. And I say 7 because there was an additional week at the very end for assistive technology, kind of a boot camp right before school started. But the general program was 6 weeks, 3 blocks, 2 weeks each. And though we had 115 sessions, there were 27 very discrete programs. Then June 22nd to the 28th, parents, some of you would know, you received a link in a Google form along with instructions. Parents selected based on the block that they could provide support with their children, or when they were available, and whether morning or afternoon was better. A lot of our sessions were duplicated morning and afternoon, so if they couldn't make one, they could make the other. So as you can see, we had over 1,000 students register. That's just the names of students. Then we had over 1,800 program selections to process in 2 weeks. And what that means is that some families selected multiple sessions, and that was part of the problem with our registration process. Some families, I think we had a handful, selected everything. So they selected grade 1. We had one that was a grade 1 communication program, and they selected the high school CPP learning model for the same student. So obviously there was miscommunication in that. But then through this process, Lisa Rhodes, her team, IPLs, reached out to all these families where there were discrepancies, made phone calls, emails, tried to find out what they really wanted for that child. We checked the IEPs to see what fit. There was a lot of communication over those 2 weeks. I think I lived about 2 months worth of life in those 2 weeks, and so did the rest of the staff. But we managed to get a lot done. Our primary focus in that time was getting everything ready for the first block. And we had some sessions that weren't going to start to the third block, so we were less focused on those at the time. Here's all the programs that you can see offered. They're kind of grouped in different ways. We had life skills, secondary, gifted. We had programs for blind, low vision, deaf, hard of hearing, students with learning disabilities, a lot of communication for programs for our students in primary grades. There was quite a bit happening. And again, everything you see in there was done within that first week of June 11th. All those titles were already in place. And what a day looks like, as I said, it was split into 2 half days at 2.5 hours each. And it was really diverse depending on the type of program, the profile of the students, the familiarity with technology of the teacher. It was a wide range of how it was run. The main mandate was meet the students, get to know them, find out what they need, and deliver a program. In essence, it was exactly what an IEP should be. Given the class sizes, it was really impressive with what was done. I was able to pop in on some of the classes. So staff would provide a link through Google Meet. Some cases they'd have a website. They'd have, some teachers even had Google Classroom running. Some cases it was phone calls. Anything they could do to make contact with the students was happening. Class sizes depended on the programming. So we had class sizes upwards of 25, right down to 2 or 3, depending on the need. Some classes were set at, say, 8 students, but the teacher met with 2 students at a time. So even though the students had 30 to 45 minutes of synchronous, the teacher was actually in synchronous much longer than that, meeting with smaller groups. And then during the asynchronous time, depending on the program, students were working on different things. Some teachers would do 15 minutes of synchronous time, give some instructions, and then meet back again for another half hour after the work was done and have conversations. I sat in on classes in life skills where they were building rockets and talking about space. It was perfect. It was actually really impressive to see the excitement. Students, staff, and then on the odd occasion, you'd see the parent in the background with a smile or a frustration if the technology wasn't working exactly as it was supposed to. The mic button, we all learned how to use the mic button really well over that time period. Give you some examples. These, I don't really want to go into these in too much detail, but they're there. So these are what teachers sent as their proposals, which gave us an overview of the course description, the expectations, were there materials that needed to be sent home or picked up by the parents, who's the intended audience, what kind of timing are you going to need. Here's a couple of pictures of some of the technology websites that were there. I wish I could go into more detail and show you them, but some of them were quite amazing. Students presented online. There's still videos prepared that the students created. It was a very interactive and personal experience for all those involved. Given what we had gone through in the spring and the learning that we had taken from that time, I think we were highly effective once we reached this level. I won't say we were at the end point. I think that's still to come, but what we learned during this and have brought then into September and our learning has been remarkable. It was a very positive piece. Here's just another website that was provided by one of the teachers. So just to give you some basic numbers, July 6th, that was the 2-week block, 325 students for 35 sessions. And you can see the breakdown there of the different groups. So that was what we were working really hard to make sure we had right, was getting those 325 students into the right programs that first day. Then the second block, we had 270 students for 25 sessions. So though it wasn't quite a relaxed time by comparison to the 4 weeks that we'd been working up until block 2, this was kind of a take a breath, let's get things in place and consolidate what we've been doing. And then on the third block, we went up to almost 500 students for 50 sessions. So though there were fewer discrete sessions being provided, there were more sessions in total. Some of the feedback that we got during the time, parents were sending emails and some students. And I'm deliberately sharing the positives. There were constructive criticisms that were provided to us. And I say that welcomingly, because the feedback really was about how we were delivering and some of the technology pieces. There was no feedback provided that was negative or critical that talked about the programs themselves. But it talked about the challenges parents had at home, all the things that we know parents face when trying to provide this. But the positive feedback, I selected some of the ones that were really speaking to what was happening now and what was really worrying or concerning us as we went into this. How well will our students handle 30 to 45 minutes of solid screen time trying to engage? How will you be able to know my child? How will I be able to handle the technology? We had a number of people that talked about the spring and the challenges there and how it hadn't worked for their child, particularly with an exceptionality, but how this had changed that. One of them is from a student there, the teacher just asked for feedback from the class, and I like 10 out of 10, I would do this again. It's not often you hear that from a summer school program. So then in summary, just to give you an overall, there were 11 weeks that we did this from start to finish, from June 4th to August 14th. Over 1,000 students served, 80 staff providing programs. You can see the breakdown there. 40 were ETFO, which are our elementary teachers, 21 EAs, 9 speech language pathologists, and 10 secondary teachers. We also were able to, because of this, support simultaneously school programs was running summer school and as per normal, secondary summer school as well. We were able to provide support for some students who were in the credit-bearing side of things. I know of 2 students who were able to get high school credits because of the support we were able to provide from our staff on this side of the programming. And because we learned and we adapted as we went along, and much of that has been able to inform what we were able to take into this September with our virtual school and providing support there. Some of the staff that provided summer learning programs are now providing mentoring to those teachers in the virtual schools in self-contained classes or in programming for students. So though I wouldn't want to ever have to be in a situation to do this again if we went backwards in time, having done it, the impact has been tremendous and highly positive. And if we move forward and are in an opportunity to do it again, I think we're well positioned to do it better and to serve our students and their needs. Thank you.
So again, we're open to questions of clarification before we get into our breakout groups. So questions you have about for more clarity of what Sean has shared.
So as people maybe are formulating their questions, Sean and Rebecca, I just want to acknowledge and applaud you and your team for the tremendous work that you've done in this area. The hard work and the creativity and dedication that was required to develop all of this programming in such a short time is just amazing. And we need to applaud and acknowledge the hard work and dedication of all the teachers and social workers in delivering those 2 sets of programs, especially at a time like this when I think every student has suffered because of the school closures due to the pandemic, and especially our most vulnerable students. So to see that our staff went above and beyond and made sure that all of these students were well supported and could continue with education and skill development is amazing. Yesterday was the International Teachers Day, and I think it's never too late to acknowledge and thank our teachers And I think our teachers have never been more loved and cherished than they are right now. We certainly appreciate what they do. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I could also add, I hope you can see why I feel so fortunate to work in Halton, work in this department, to be part of this team. You know, Becky and Sean are two examples of the many, many fine staff that I have the good fortune to work with and support all of our kids. Student services, we have some staff that work directly with students, but a lot of our work is about supporting schools in their growth and their ability to support kids. And so kinds of things that our staff have stepped up to do has just been fantastic. I'm not, you know, Sean is incredibly hardworking and puts in long hours. He's extremely dedicated to this work. I'm not quite sure I've seen him at that limit of how hard he was running in the spring. Trying to get all this running was just incredible. But I also know he didn't work alone. You know, he had a full team behind him, putting in long hours to pull all this off. When he was describing to me what they were trying to do, I was a bit incredulous, but they pulled it off. And as you can see from the number of programs that were offered, the number of kids that were served, truly fantastic. So hats off, Sean, to you and your team. Again, I'm not sure if Sean got any summer holidays this year, but he stepped up and did what was needed to serve our kids. So thank you, Sean. So I don't see any questions. So I think maybe it's time to hand it over to Lorna.
Sorry, Mark. A couple of us have our hands
There
up.
are 3 people who have questions.
Okay, we were looking for your hands in the chat box. That's what we.
They're in the chat box. So Sophia.
Yeah, it just showed up now. Yeah,
Okay.
it just showed up now.
Okay,
So
go ahead.
Sophia, go ahead.
So I guess my comments were to Sean. Sean, we had firsthand experience in the program. My son was in it for 2 weeks. And honestly, like I have to reiterate what everybody's saying. It was incredible, especially being in lockdown for so long and a student like with his profile in a mainstream class, the online learning platform didn't cater to him with his mainstream class. He was so disengaged, really no learning happened for a long stretch. And then the summer learning program started and honestly, he loved it. I sat with him on the computer. The teachers were incredibly engaging. The programming was fun. Like they had hat day and they had, you know, fun things that the kids had something to look forward to after being sort of in lockdown. It was sort of like the light at the end of the tunnel. So, and I can imagine when I filled out that survey, I was thinking, I'm like, how on earth are they going to organize these answers? Because it was quite detailed, but thank you for the work that all of you did. It really, really, it was amazing. And I would love for it to be something that we do annually, because I think our kids often, they regress even further in the summertime without anything programming happening for them. So this was just fantastic. So thank you so much.
Okay, Margot, your question.
Hi, so thank you very much. Again, it's so great to hear, you know, especially stories back from people like Sophia who've had firsthand experience. I have 3 questions, but they're all very different. So my first question is with the students, so you talked about between half an hour and 45 minutes of synchronous time. The time that they were asynchronous, were we dependent on the parents for that? To supervise? That's my first question.
Yes. Sorry, my mic was on. Yes.
So if students in these programs didn't have parents that were available to supervise them, did we as a board, I know you talked about there was in total 50 teachers and 21 EAs and 9 speech and language pathologists. Were there any supports for those students who may have had difficulty accessing the asynchronous portions of the time?
Yes. But the support, the way the teachers were instructed and the EAs was with your class, find out what the needs are, talk to the parents, and if there's a need, let us know and we'll figure out how to problem solve. I didn't have that question come to me. I had no parents come to me and say, I need help with the asynchronous time.
So
But
not my question, but my worry there is that whole, I'm going to say that equity lens of those parents who might not feel comfortable asking. Do we have opportunities or ideas in place of thinking about those families who may not have that opportunity to have, I don't know, supervised asynchronous time?
It's a good question. I'm struggling to see how somebody in a different location can be responsible for supervision when the person is somewhere else and they're
Oh, I know it's a $1 million question, but I'm just trying to think, are there, I know that's something that I just think of that in the terms of, I know that there are, so, you think of what I think points of intersectionality. So we have students who have exceptionalities, and we have students who come from lower economic status who may not have that opportunity to have the parents with them. Have we considered looking at opportunities to allow those families from more marginalized populations have the opportunity to engage in these summer structured learning where they so desperately need that?
So what you're suggesting,
I'm just asking,
to really be effective, right, would require greater synchronous time. Yeah, I think that's what we're moving towards if we continue on this trajectory. We're seeing it now already in the virtual school, right? So the summer learning, we didn't have, I wouldn't even say we had the programming in place to figure out how we would do it for that length of time. We're better at it now and we're continuing to grow. So yes, moving forward, that would be what we're looking for.
and again, so that's kind of leads on to am I okay to ask my next question, Joanna? I know that Deirdre has a question as well, but again, that kind of, you spoke of that this isn't the end point. We still haven't gotten to that penultimate end point. So in looking at that, what are those next steps that as a board we have identified in what we need to do to move towards the best possible scenario that we can provide for all of our families in the board?
So that's a great question, and I believe that's actually part of the breakout sessions.
Oh, okay.
For your feedback as well as, we've got some thoughts as well, but we want some of your thinking.
Okay. Thank you. And again, thank you so much. As I said, it's so great to hear stories like Sophia who were directly impacted by this. That always makes it, for me, that much more meaningful, hearing those personal stories that show the positive impact that we've had. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Margot. Great questions. And now a question from Deirdre, please.
Hi, I'm just wondering, Mark, if you guys expected to have so many families sign up for the summer learning, where it was such a big onslaught of families that did sign up. Was that expected, or did you think that maybe there was going to be less people sign up, essentially?
I think that's for you, Sean.
Okay. We weren't surprised by the number. We were of two minds. Either people were just done with school and everything and just wanted to shut down from technology and be on their own, and we weren't going to have many at all, or it was going to be exactly what we saw. We were kind of slanted towards what happened. We weren't prepared. Like, there just wasn't time to get things in place to handle what was coming in as fast as we could. But it's why we brought Lisa on board and why she was essential in making sure this happened. And I say as smoothly as it did, because had we not, this would have been an incredibly challenging situation. So we weren't surprised. I'd still like to see more. I think if we did it again, I think we would be able to handle it. Knowing what we know now, we wouldn't have to build as quickly. So we wouldn't have to do all that prep work that took up a lot of our time. We could spend more time getting the information out to parents, getting teachers to submit what they want to do, those kinds of things. So we could offer even more if this opportunity arises again.
And I do think from what our families had as an experience, it was more at the beginning in terms of the organization of getting the information out. Once it came to enjoying the programming, the kids were all over it. It was really great feedback, but it was just kind of getting the message out was where it just didn't come out, as a lot of people just didn't hear about it. Like we sent the message out, but even teachers were like, well, I don't know. I don't know. I haven't heard of it. And I was like, no, it's out there. So I think, and again, I think it's because it just came so quickly to you, and then you guys had to, move as quickly as you could. So otherwise, the programming was great, and it was such good feedback. And it was like a soft start, I think, for virtual school for everybody, and the kids were really engaged as far as we heard. Yeah, so my kids loved it anyways too.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm glad the programming was good.
Thank you.
I think the other
Yeah.
key to it is it wasn't just the timing, and that was huge, right? We're talking 2 weeks. It was when it was, which was at the very end of the year when everybody's trying to wrap up. So paying attention to all the messaging that was coming out, there was a lot of things that got lost in that for the teachers just trying to finish with the students they had. So it's not an excuse, but I'm hoping that if this happens again, it won't be such a tight timeline, and we'll have the opportunity to really focus on the messaging. Thanks.
Thank you.
A reminder that we were only able to do this because the ministry provided specific funding for it. So those staff all didn't work for free. So if we're, I'm saying that to help you understand why it happened specifically. And if you're hoping it's going to happen again next summer, we have to have funding arrive for that to be the case. So now I think, is that all the hands? I think so.
I think so.
Okay, so maybe we'll hand it over now to Lorna to explain how our breakout groups will work.
Okay, so first we'll go on a pause so we can figure out that, and Lorna will provide us with the information.
So I did have this problem. I don't know if Diane's having the same problem I had in the breakout sessions. I couldn't hear anybody. So I don't know if that's what Diane's problem is right now. Can you hear me, Diane?
Yes, I can hear people, but the volume is not high at all. I mean, it's not regular volume.
Whoa.
Hi, Diane.
Can you turn it up on your phone at all, Diane?
I've got it turned up high, Mark.
Don't know. Sorry about that.
It's all right. I can hear, but it's barely. So carry on.
Okay. The next agenda item is the SEAC discussion item, and I wondered if anybody had put their name down for discussion in the chat box. I don't see anybody's name, but if anybody does have any questions so far. Yep. We now next item, which is 4.0, which is communication to SEAC.
Would you like me to go into my report, Lou?
Well, it's so. It's item 4.1, which is the superintendent's report, which Mark did distribute to all of us. But over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Lou. So this, I apologize, everyone. I don't think it went out to you until this morning. It's just part of the busy times we're in right now. So thanks for your patience with me. So in my report, you'll see, sorry, I'm just flipping screens here. So I started with the virtual schools because I just want you to understand how challenging it has been to start up these schools in a few short weeks, and the sheer volume of kids. I believe we have over 15,000 students in our virtual schools, and so it's been really challenging to get those up and running. Again, I have to take my hat off to all of our staff working in those schools. I know it's been just in really hard work they put in. I know they've been nights and weekends, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it really is incredible work they've been doing. So, and staff are through that learning, all the variety of ways to support students with special needs. Something that Sean didn't get into in detail is that we did a lot of learning in the spring. We did a lot of learning in the summer, and have been able to apply that to our virtual learning that's been provided in the through this model. So that's just an ongoing piece of work for us, and we're trying to really meet the needs of our kids through the virtual school model. So we've heard lots of real positive feedback on that. We've also known of some real struggles that some students and families have been having, and so we continue to work through that. And again, appreciate people's patience. Next is the consolidation of some of our self-contained classes. I've come to you with reports every year about changes in our self-contained classes. This happens more often in the spring than in the fall, but we do make these kinds of changes in the fall as well. And but this has certainly been has had a larger scale, I guess, or scope of this because of the number of families choosing the virtual model. So it's been quite significant. So in the chart in my report, you can see there's a larger number of classes that have been impacted, and but our focus here is trying to provide the best learning environment for our students. So those we've been doing the transition planning for those students. Those are in process now. I know of I've talked to a few teachers and principals and some families, and know that there has been virtual visits going on to classes, meeting students and staff, and all the things are in place to make sure those students are able to start in those classes on the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. Also speak here, my third item to, I see Melissa's hand up. Do you want me to take questions as we go or at the end? What would you prefer, Lou? Do you want me to finish my report and then take questions?
Yes, Mark, I think probably you should finish the report because I think there will be quite a few questions. So let's finish the report and then I'll deal with the hands in the chat box.
Okay, thanks.
So keep going, okay.
The CCAT 7, which you'll know that we implemented this a few years ago, is our new assessment tool for our students in grade 4. We're moving ahead with this with our students in our in-school settings, in-person settings. So that will move ahead. And then we need to know the number of students that we're dealing with in the virtual setting. So we won't know that until November, the end of November, when families indicate, because we have a survey going out. There's a survey out now for families in secondary schools to choose either the in-person or virtual model at the end of this quadmester. And there will be a survey also going out soon to elementary families for students to make that same choice, families to make that same choice for the end of November. So we need to know how many grade 4 students we're talking about in the virtual setting to be able to try to figure out how we might administer this assessment for students in the virtual setting. So you can see I've included some options we're investigating, not knowing if they're even possible. One of which is possible large settings on such as a gym on a weekend, possibly an online version. When we contacted the publisher, there's only a US version available. So we're not sure if those norms are acceptable with Canadian students. And we also have some concerns when it can't be proctored. So there are challenges with that. And then there's also, it's always an option of deferring to a later grade. So we're looking at options for that CCAT administration. And then the psych ed assessments update. I've got some numbers late this afternoon from staff who have been working to pull this together. And I'm going to send these out to you. They're just, I apologize that they've come in a way that isn't quite what I'd like to, in the format I'd like to send to you. So, I can tell you that our wait list has currently 535 students on it. Last September, we had 628 students on that wait list. So I think I spoke a few times last year about our efforts to work down that wait list, which we have done. But there are also students who haven't come forward yet through SRT and IPRC for, sorry, not for, through SRT, not IPRC, through SRT for a request for an assessment. So some of those haven't happened yet. So we're not quite comparing apples and apples from last September to this September. So I'd like to be able to share this with you with more detail in terms of what these numbers mean. But I can say to you, there are almost 100 students fewer at this time this year than last year on our wait list. So I know I know Deirdre in her question asked for more of a breakdown of this, and I don't have that for you right now. I'm sorry. So I need to get that with more detail to you. So that is my superintendent's report for this month, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, there are two questions. The first is from Melissa Dockery, and then Margot, and then Deirdre. Melissa?
Hi, Martin and the committee. I'm just curious as to if every means necessary was attempted to try to prevent the movement of the contained classes to locations. I know, just speaking from experience, those students, in the springtime had a really hard time accessing being part of, Google Classrooms and having access. You have to keep in mind, as I said at the last meeting, all therapy was stopped. No OT, no speech, no occupational therapy. If we were lucky enough to have supportive principals, we were able to pick up supplies from the school, such as walkers and other sort of equipment to be able to use at home. But those kids have been in almost complete isolation since March. Then we finally, many of whom have many health concerns on top of some special needs, decide to send our students back to school. And then within 3 weeks, families are getting notices that their child now is going to be on the bus for upwards to over an hour, and that they're moving schools to a completely new teacher who doesn't know the students. Never mind doesn't know the students, but certainly doesn't know the students post a 4 or 5 month delay in, without any services. And so these students are moving to these new locations. Certainly amongst the parent community, there's much frustration, anger. How could we have not just left some of these classrooms? I mean, I'm aware that typically a classroom has about 10 students per one teacher amongst EAs, and some of them were down to 2 or 3. But in the interim, with so much confusion and upheaval, the fact that students can re-enter in November and then again in January, why was everything done to ensure that we could not leave these classes? And my second question upon that is the teacher whose class was collapsed, where were they reallocated to? Because I think you have a huge asset of those teachers, and now were they put back into a different classroom? Where did those teachers go?
Great questions, Melissa. Thanks for those. So, yeah, when we deliberated about these changes, we certainly talked about those, the challenges that would come with making a change at this time. Most of the time, these changes occur in the spring. And we have parents with, very similar questions and concerns happen then, where, they are, would really prefer that their class not move to another school or be consolidated, or, all those things happen then as well. And that transition to a new class is certainly very difficult. Most of the time, like I said, these changes happen in the springtime. So for these to happen in the fall, we do have some happen every fall, but not many. So, with the list that you've seen in my report, that's a longer list that was created by with the number of families choosing that virtual model. So when we looked at this, we thought, okay, so if we leave a class, let's say, the first class on the list is a life skills class at Alexander School in Burlington. Do we leave that class as it is with 3 students? And so we deliberated a lot about that and knew that this transition would be difficult, and that those students would be going not too far in that case to Florence Mears. So that would be a transition. There would be a change in start time for those families. There would be a new teacher, some new classmates, etc. So all of those kinds of things we deliberated, but we contrasted that with having 3 students in that class for the whole year. And we know that there's a lot of value in having a larger class, that the opportunity for students to learn together from one another, that the opportunities for social interactions are important, the community building that goes on in the class. If we had a class of 3 in the spring, that class would not continue for all those reasons. We would make sure that we created a larger class to give that those students a fulsome school experience. So we deliberated about not doing this at all. We deliberated about waiting until November when the other changes will come for other students. And we decided not to do that because we thought the longer that our students stay in this class, this small class, that the harder it will be to make that change. We know that some of our students have a hard time with with these changes, and that, you know, to sort of draw the analogy that we'd be pulling the Band-Aid off even slower if we waited. We thought better off to do it now. You know, we've only had students in classes for a few weeks, and that for them to get into their new setting and be there for the whole rest of the year. We have 8 more months of school, 8.5 more months. They thought that was more important to get that set for the rest of the year. So we know this has been very difficult for some, and I'd like to say that our staff, this is kind of our bread and butter, is supporting these transitions. So I know our staff in our department have kind of, you know, the direction has been, you know, make sure these transitions are really solid, really well in place for our students. And so we've been supporting schools in doing all those things to make sure that these have happened well. So I know that may not be comfort for some families that have to make this change, but we're trying to do a short-term pain for a long-term gain for the benefit of the rest of the year, to be with a larger group and to have all the benefits that come with that. I've been asked the question, what about what happens with the changes in November? What will happen with our classes then? We'll have to wait and see. You know, do we want to do this again? No, we don't. I hope that our students are pretty set, but, you know, none of us can predict. We're seeing, you know, cases rise, and it's hard to say with this pandemic, but, you know, we're trying to do right by our students as best we can. I know someone won't necessarily agree with our approach, but that was, you know, that's been our intention from the get-go. Sorry, Melissa, did I answer your second question?
Well, no. So my second question involves staff and where the reallocation of the staff.
Right.
Right. But to answer that question, I think you're right. November won't see a huge upswing, but I think in January the consensus is we're going to have massive amounts of reorganization. So will those students then be, and all their equipment, etc., be moved back to their original schools?
Yeah, we've tried to look forward and talk about those what ifs, and you know, a lot of it is for sure the numbers and also the timing. At some point in time, we will say, you know, we're not going to make the change. It's too late in the year to do that. And in some cases, it'll depend, you know, again, on those numbers. You know, for example, you know, to go to the extreme, a class of 1 isn't a class as far as I'm concerned. Right? That's just an individual program. So, you know, if we had that kind of situation, let's say in February, would we go and move that student, or would we look to design something specific for that student in that school? And I think we'll really have to look out, you know, sort of think outside the box about how we'll approach those situations, you know, as the year progresses. So I'd like to say, you know, we had that crystal ball to know where things will go, but we just don't. So you know, we definitely don't want to be moving students over and over and over. That's not our intention either. We're trying to have, you know, our students in a good spot for the rest of the year. That's our intention anyway. With regards to the staff, I don't know the outcome for every one of those teachers. I know that many of them are moving to the virtual school to teach a self-contained class there. And that's because when the virtual schools were started, I think I shared this with you last month, you know, we filled those staffing positions with staff that need to be accommodated for their own needs to be in a virtual setting, and with staff that volunteered, and with staff that were what we call surplus from a school that shrank in population, but we also hired a number of staff, and a number of those staff that we hired were hired into self-contained classes. So those staff, if they were hired for a what we call an LTO, a long-term occasional contract, they would then be bumped, and these staff would move into those positions. So I know not all, but many of them are teaching self-contained classes in the virtual schools. And I think Margot's next, I think.
Melissa, are you done? I saw you put your speaker back on.
Yeah, no, I'm done, but I think we really need to make sure that, I mean, just speaking out of personal experience, I would say the special needs community has been the families that have been forgotten for the last 6 months. No respite, no therapy, no anything. And I think another major upheaval for this group of families is a lot. So please keep that in mind, that that we're dealing with a group of families that have been very isolated for the last 6 months, and more change and more upheaval with our students going back to school is very difficult.
Thanks for that feedback, Melissa.
Yeah, so again, one of the questions I had emailed you about, I think Melissa kind of touched on a little bit, was the whole idea of the change in transportation and times that students would have to take to school for these groups that will have to change schools. But my question is this, and I actually sort of chastised myself because I had wanted to ask this question when you originally gave us the listing of the new classes in schools. So there was a class for students who identified with learning disabilities at Pineland School, which is a French immersion school. So my question for that is, with our students that are in that self-contained classroom from the French immersion stream?
No, from the English stream. They were from the English stream. Well,
So they were,
yeah, so they're not French immersion students.
okay, so then that negates my next question, because my question was then that you were having two students who were in a school that was for French immersion, and they were then being shifted to an English streamed school. So I that sort of didn't really make sense to me, but it does if they were in an English stream. So, okay, that answers my question.
Okay, and I think Deirdre's next.
Hi. Yes, I was just following up regarding the psychoed assessments. I had also asked about missed assessments from the spring, and you had said that there were some within that number of 535 that hadn't gone through SRT. Are we including some that were not given psychoed assessments from the spring? Or are those the ones you're speaking of that haven't gone through SRT?
No, these are all students that have gone through SRT and been recommended by the school for an assessment. So everyone on that wait list has been through that process. When I talked about students who haven't been brought to SRT, I said that referring to there would have been, if for those of you who are familiar, when we think about our problem-solving pathway that's in our special education plan, there are a number of steps that go along where the school and the family are working together, trying to problem solve. Why is this student facing some challenges? What are the things that we can do in the classroom to try and address those challenges? And because oftentimes we find solutions, right? And that's as it should. The solutions should happen in the classroom if we can. It isn't until we've tried a number of things where we say, you know what, maybe we need to understand the student's learning profile better, and that's when the recommendation goes forward for an assessment. So I said that to say that I think there were probably some students in that process that didn't get all the way to that recommendation stage at SRT. So I think that those conversations will be starting up again this fall, where the schools continue to problem solve and talk to families and potentially come forward for an assessment. So that's why I'm not sure if that number of 535 is truly representative of students that will be, coming through with a recommendation as well. So it looks like we're 100 students fewer waiting at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not sure if it's truly representative, because we've had 6 months of pandemic, right? Of such upheaval and change that it's I don't think it's a fair comparison. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
So we think that maybe the backlog of what might be perceived of not receiving psychoed assessments might be that they just haven't progressed through the SRT as far as making those decisions.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
That's a speculation on my part. Yeah.
Do we have numbers, or we'd have files on everybody who's kind of within, I mean, our certs would have all of that information. We'd have the numbers for what that all looks like, right?
Yeah, but we'd have to check in with every school and say, tell us where you're at with this process. Do you have more students you think you're recommending for an assessment to really get that fulsome picture, right? And I'll be honest, that's the last thing I want to ask our certs right now, who are really running hard. Things are pretty fast paced in schools right now with everything that's going on. So.
And what about this year and plans for this year going forward? Are we focusing on what they have now in terms of caseloads, being that they're probably backlogged trying to deal with virtual and in person? Is there plans for new cases like for this school year, or?
So we're moving ahead with our assessments as we have in the past. We have things in place such as all the things we've talked about around masks and distancing and that kind of thing. Because of the length of time that an assessment takes, and because of the exchange of materials that has to happen with some assessments between the psych ed consultant and the student. We are using the plexiglass barriers, like you see in stores, those kinds of things with a hole at the bottom. So we are using that as well. But we're moving ahead with assessments as we normally would. In the virtual schools, we are also doing assessments. There are some parts that can be done via email, such as parent responses. There are parent surveys that go on for some of the assessments. But where we need to have our staff interact directly with students, we are asking if the student can, if the family's comfortable, for the student to come into a school or into one of our ed centers. So we're giving that option because we want to move ahead and with those assessments for those students, and we can't validate them in terms of the norms if we haven't conducted the assessment as it's meant to be. We spend a lot of time looking at it and saying, is there another way to do some of these? And there aren't other options out there. You need to do it directly. So we're trying to provide, families. Like, for example, some of them are coming into our New Street Center in Burlington or into our Milton Center at EC Drury, where we can have a separate place for them, not around other students, those kinds of things, if that's what that student or family would like. So we've developed ways around that to be able to still serve students in the virtual setting. So we are moving ahead with our assessments.
And just one last question: are certs being trained to assist and to do assessments, part of the SRT? Like, have they been given training to help our special ed students virtually? Because I know that must be a whole different ballgame.
Sure. So we continue to offer what we call cert learning sessions. We would normally do those, face-to-face in pre-COVID. So I know, for example, one went on today virtually. So We continue with our professional development. One of the nice things we can do is that we can record them and just post those for staff that can't join live at the time. They can watch it afterwards. So we still provide CERT learning opportunities, which includes things like how am I a CERT during COVID, right? What does my support look like? What does the role of the EA look like, etc. So we're providing that kind of direction and learning for our staff through CERT learning and other means as well.
Okay, thank you. And we'll be able to get those numbers in the breakdown as well, like regarding the.
Yeah, thanks for your patience. I just need to do more of a breakdown than just two numbers. I think that doesn't.
I know there's a lot going on. Thank you.
Yeah, it doesn't tell you the story that you really want, right? So, okay, thanks for your patience. I think Sophia's next. Sophia, are you still there? It doesn't look like you're on mute, but we can't hear you. This happens to me sometimes, and I need to leave the meeting and come back, and sometimes that fixes the audio.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, there you go. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So I just wanted to come back to the collapsing of classes because, oh my goodness, our members were really, really upset. So before actually we heard from you, I had a couple of emails from families giving me a heads up saying there's rumblings, this might be happening. And unfortunately, my response was there's no way they would ever do that. These are our most vulnerable students, and no, that's not going to happen. Rest assured, I haven't heard anything. If it was going to happen, we would have heard about it. Of course, a couple days later, we received your email, and then I had to take my words back and then send an email to our membership. So I guess my question, to add to what Melissa was saying, I'm wondering, because November is sort of that next time where families could possibly come back, and possibly some of those kids that were virtual may come back to in school. Given that the changes were coming in November, I mean, I have to ask the question, why we didn't just wait for that before making the move to collapse, which is in my eyes, and knowing the families, like, it's such a major change.
Sorry, my mic was off. Yeah, thanks. I guess a similar response to what I gave to Melissa's question, that we deliberated about that and thought that our experiences, the longer that students stay with the staff of those classes, the more attached they become and the more difficult the change becomes. So we thought better to do it now, get students into that new setting. It's kind of like when we reorganize our classes in the rest of the school. We don't, some boards wait and do it quite late. We do ours in September because we know that the sooner the better to get into those new classes. So I know that worked for some of the students in this change, and for others that was difficult. So I wish we could, sort of please everybody in that process. But if we had waited for till November, we would get families saying, "Why did you wait? If you were going to
Yeah.
do."
But for sure, I mean, we do collapse classes in all of our schools for sure, and this year more than ever, and many of us have been impacted. But I guess just for this group, knowing how vulnerable they are, knowing that many of them are already bused, and the changes and the profiles, I don't know. I would hope, maybe in the future, if you could take our feedback and just say, really think not twice, but like 100 times before, or exhaust every possible solution before collapsing these classes in particular. Just because I know families have been emailing me, and of course, there's nothing that we can do, and people are really, really sort of just upset at that, given that our kids really suffered during the pandemic and quarantine too. So anyway, I think you had mentioned in your reply to me that the Martin Street decision had been reversed, or I just wanted to clarify that, because I see in your superintendent report that it looks like there was still a move made there. Just want to clarify.
Yeah. Thanks. Maybe I'll clarify that. So we had a few changes at Martin Street. One was we had 2 life skills classes there that we had initially decided to close, and then when we looked more closely at the numbers, decided to keep those open. So that was the change that happened. What continued was we had 2 communication classes that can go up to 8 students that only had 4 in each of them. So those we combined, and we had an LD class there that we consolidated with 2 other classes as well in Milton. So the 2 of the changes at Martin Street went ahead, the life skills one didn't. So if that, I hope that helps clarify.
Okay. Yeah, just I had families asking and I wasn't sure. So, okay. And is there any chance now, of course, I know you already touched on this, but let's say miraculously in November, some of those kids in those original classes decide to come back. What happens?
Yeah, we will cross that bridge when it comes. We will be watching the numbers carefully when they come in. We will have more time to plan and, to make some arrangements. I know some parents had to ask, could you have at least consulted with us? I think we'll have more time to look and see if that's an option as well. Everything just happened so fast in the fall. The ministry was changing models pretty late and making decisions pretty late, I think. A lot of us would agree. So, and then, maybe the ministry's been doing the best they can too. So that, but we will have more time for those decisions. And, hopefully we won't be making changes. I can tell you already, the secondary survey has been out for a little bit. There are quite a few students that have responded, well, I'll say families that have responded so far choosing virtual. So I know you, I think you still work in PO, at least you did, Sophia. And,
yes, I do.
And, you've had an even greater uptake for virtual school there than we
Oh,
have.
for sure. So like I said, we've reorganized quite a bit. I don't work in special education, so I don't know about some of our contained programs, but in the regular classrooms. But I mean, that's the thing. I always sort of look at our contained programs and those vulnerable students very differently. And, if it was in my hands and I was in charge, I'd say, okay, let's collapse the regular classrooms and put some extra funding in to keep those contained classes as is.
Yeah. But in the end, it wasn't about funding. We looked at it and said, to have 2 students in a class for a whole year, we just didn't think that was right. We didn't
Really? See, I would play devil's advocate and say those kids would now then really get the support that they need to do really, really well. And maybe let's bring some kids from other class. I mean, I know it's the pandemic, so we can't really mix.
Yeah. If you had 2 students in the class who could be integrated a lot with other students and join other students at recess and have all those interactions, we might have a different conversation. But during the pandemic, there's no crossing of cohorts.
Yeah.
So those 2 students would be on their own for the whole year, right?
Yeah.
I've talked to a number of staff about what this looks like in schools. One example, this hasn't happened everywhere, but one example is I talked to a principal and said, there's 3 students in this class. We were supposed to have 7 in the beginning of the year, but only 3 are there now. 2 girls and a boy, sorry, 2 boys and a girl.
Right.
And when they go for recess, they can't join other classes. So that girl, many recesses, has stood by herself and cried.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, it's heartbreaking, and there's definitely, I mean, we're in a challenging time for sure. I guess I'm hearing firsthand the challenges the parents are having, and it just breaks my heart, so. Anyhow.
So I'm confident that these transitions will be handled well, and our students will be supported in that process. And, some will take longer than others. We appreciate that. And then we'll have a good rest of the year. That's truly our plan and our hope for this.
Hopefully, yes. Thanks.
Thanks. So I don't see any other hands here. I think I see Allison has her hand down now. So I think I'm done, Lou. On with the agenda.
Yep. We're moving right along to association reports. Are there any association reports? Alison.
Yeah, just to let everybody know that it is the Learning Disabilities Awareness Month this month. So there will be lots of activities going on at LDAHH. We have an IEP and IPRC workshop tomorrow night. There'll be other events going on the rest of the month. So just wanted to make everybody aware that we are celebrating students with learning disabilities this month.
Thank you, Alison. The next one is Deirdre.
Hello, all. I've written something that we're including as an association report from ABC Ontario Halton, just regarding virtual learning for self-contained gifted. I touched on it a little bit last week, that the day of our SEAC meeting, we found out, or our virtual online learning families found out, that there was going to be a self-contained gifted opportunity for self-contained gifted students. Prior to that, they were unaware because there was no option for them. So I just wanted to give a voice to those families, to provide a little bit of context, to let you know kind of what was happening within the community leading up to the beginning of school for them. Here it goes. So quite often gifted learners have a heightened sensitivity and intense emotionality, along with an array of other traits and needs. At their IPRCs, they are placed in self-contained classrooms setting to be amongst accepting peers and receive a more individualized education with like-minded classmates who understand their different approaches and ideas. The lockdown and alienation of COVID-19 can cause fear, depression, and anxiety in most any child, but it can be debilitating for a young person with extreme emotional needs. We've spoken to families who had to seek out therapy for their young gifted children during this time due to deep depression and severe anxiety. Families received communications for a month leading up to the start of school at HDSB regarding virtual learning for students. This communication stated that students with IEPs would be supported by special education resource teachers within the virtual classroom, but did not provide clarification for learners who were previously placed in self-contained environments. Families reached out for more information on how virtual learning would be provided for self-contained gifted learners, and were originally told that there was no virtual self-contained option, but that decision makers were open to the idea of possible grouping identified gifted learners depending on how many decided to sign up for virtual learning. Otherwise, families could guarantee a self-contained placement if they chose in-person learning for their child. The situation had families struggling to make the difficult decision on whether they chose to place their learner back with peers in the classroom, which also came with potential health risks, or virtual learning possibly away from peer interactions, needed now more than ever. Many felt at a loss. Although they preferred the distant learning option, they chose the in-class environment because being in a self-contained class with their peers was the most important factor. On September 15th, 2020, the day before virtual learning was to begin, families of virtual learners were informed that there was now a self-contained gifted class available for their child. Only those who had chosen virtual learning weeks before could attend. Many families who had decided on in-class placement felt that they were not given a fair choice. One family who we were in touch with had decided to place their gifted son with autism in a classroom because of his special bond that he has with his classmates. The same child had 2 bouts of pneumonia and lives with family members over the age of 55. Perhaps if the option of self-contained learning was available to him and his classmates, he would have a close cohort of peers to connect with online rather than in person. Being a self-contained placement, classroom placement is a decision made by an IPRC ruling for those learners based on need. The delay in communication and this whole situation put the health and well-being of our learners and their family at risk. So I just wanted to express that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other association reports?
Lou,
if not,
Lou, do you mind if I respond to that?
You can respond.
Thanks. Thanks for sharing that, Deirdre. You know, I probably had that question more than any other during our lead up to our, the opening of schools. And, I tried to, in my responses, I think you saw some of them, I tried to say to parents, we will run self-contained classes if we can. But again, it depended on the numbers. So I couldn't promise families that, going back to the consolidation we just did of some of our self-contained classes, I couldn't promise families that we would run a self-contained virtual class. For example, if there was only 3 students in grade 5 that, with a gifted profile that chose that, because we'd only have 3 kids, for example. So, maybe a blended class, but we just didn't know what the numbers would be. So it was, I guess if we had families say, yes, I'd like that, if there's going to be one, if we had given that option, and if they say if there isn't one, then I'll choose this. But I know families had to make the choice, one or the other, and part of that was just the time constraints we were under. So, if we could do it over again, maybe we would have, put forward some, certainly more time, but maybe some different wording or the ability to express the different option. But I didn't want to say to a family, yes, there will be a gifted class for students in grade 6 if there weren't enough kids. So that was the numbers part that was behind my response. So I don't know if that helps, but I appreciate what you're saying, that families felt stuck, but they didn't know what was going to be the option, so they felt they had to choose, potentially in class.
But even in our communications, I had said to you, could we even group gifted learners in cohorts? And the response was, possibly. Yeah. We'll think about it. So there was the IPRC rulings are there because these gifted learners are to be in a self-contained classroom. All other self-contained classrooms are virtual. Was there any other special need classroom that wasn't offered self-contained virtually?
Yeah, we don't have a virtual behavior resource class.
And those students are?
So I think we might have had only one student request that. So we talked to that family and said, what do you want to do? And we had a few options for that family that were virtual, but in other setting options, and including a regular class or a regular class in person, in school, or we looked at the student's profile to see if possibly another self-contained setting that student was also eligible for. So we really tried to meet the needs of that student. But as a result, as I said, there is no virtual behavior resource class because there weren't enough students. So we would have, if that was the case with our gifted students, we would have talked that through with families as well. But there are, I can't remember how many the gifted classes there are. There's lots. I think there's
lots, yeah. Self-contained, yeah. But see, but there was there was so many self-contained gifted parents who just had they kind of just winged it. It was kind of like, I have to make a choice. And they didn't know they were in self-contained gifted until the day before virtual learning started. So, we were talking to parents who were really, taken aback to say, I'm just choosing kind of like like I have no option. It's either I try and put my child back with their peers in a in-person setting, or I just choose virtual because that's where my family is most comfortable right now. And if they don't end up in self-contained, well, we're just going to have to figure it out and hope that I can get them to socialize somehow, some way. Right? I mean, I just don't think it was a fair a fair opportunity for them. And it was
Yeah.
very, very difficult for them.
Right.
And so, you know, the night that we had our last SEAC, you know, I came to you and I said, you know, thank you. It's amazing. Like, it really was amazing for them. And, but, you know, going over it tonight, I felt I needed to give them a voice because it was extremely stressful. And there was a lot of, a lot of communication happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. So hopefully when the survey goes out again.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
Well, there'll be more clarity about what's available.
Definitely. Right? Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of chatter now, I can see. So people are wondering what to do now. Yeah. Because now their kids are in. So now they're not sure what to do with them. Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll go
Thanks
from there.
for sharing that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving along. We'll move along to the trustee report. And I think that's you, Margot.
It is. Thank you, Lucille. Okay, really just two things. The first is just on behalf of all the trustees, I just want to give a great big shout out to all the staff who have been involved in getting us through our first month of school, both in person and online. So that staff includes teachers, principals, educational assistants, custodians, superintendents, and our director. We couldn't have done this alone. It's really great to see the community effort and parents as well who have gone into trying to ensure that we have had a successful return to school, whether it be in person or online. So just a big thank you from all the trustees. Secondly, and it's probably sort of leading on from that, is we are continuing to do the work on our multi-year plan. So our multi-year plan was expected to have been done earlier, but we've taken a little bit of a hiatus just because of competing priorities that have come up, but we are holding 2 coffee conversations so that people from different areas such as SEAC can come out and ensure that their voice is heard to what we are going to include in our multi-year plan for the upcoming 4 years. So these 2 coffee conversations are occurring on Thursday, October the 8th, from 5 until 6 o'clock in the evening. And then the second one is Friday, October the 9th, from noon till 1 o'clock. So we would really appreciate members of SEAC coming out to these coffee conversations to give your input as to what you see as our priorities in our upcoming multi-year plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Margot. Are there any committee reports? Okay, I don't see anybody's name in the list. So I suppose the committees haven't met yet, but anyway, I'm moving on to the next agenda item, which is future agenda topics.
So does anybody have any suggestions for the upcoming agenda for November or December meetings? Okay, if you think of anything, please do email Lucille and I, or just go through Lorna as well. And we'll consider that for the upcoming meetings. Thank you.
Okay, I think that comes to the end of our action part of the meeting. Sorry, Mark.
Yeah, sorry. Can I ask just for any feedback on our breakout groups? You know, we're trying to sort of replicate our breakout tables that we've done in the past. Do people feel that was of value? Was it effective? And once you kind of got into the room and got into that group, is that something you'd like to see us repeat?
Yeah.
Or repeat with some change of some sort?
I'll jump in here, Mark. So they were good. I think I guess one group had more people in it. The other one didn't have very many people in it. But I think in the breakout rooms, you can put a time limit. So that might be better. So you can say, okay, you're going to break out for 10 minutes and then come back. And then the rooms shut down automatically and everybody comes back to the main group. So maybe something like that might help next time. But I think it definitely is nice to be able to discuss in a smaller group.
Thanks, Sophia. Anyone else?
I think it worked well. I think we communicated well, and it was easy to use the Google Doc to get all of our thoughts down and to edit. We could all edit it. I think it was successful.
Okay, we'll look at that for future meetings. Okay, thanks everyone.
Thank you. So I think I'm ready to adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Night, everybody.
See you.
Good night.